There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm James Carberry.
And I'm Jonathan Green.
Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Carla Johnson. She's the founder of Type A Communications. She's a keynote speaker. She's an author. She's a storyteller. Carla, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me this morning, James.
I am really excited to chat with you today, Carla. Before we jump into the topic today, we're going to be talking about bringing more creativity into B2B marketing. So, obviously, with our listeners being B2B marketers, I think this is going to be right up their alley. But before we do that, could you explain to our listeners what you and your team are up to at Type A Communications?
Yeah, absolutely. We work with B2B brands to help them take great brand stories that they're pulling together and turn them into really differentiating and creative customer experiences. Whether that customer is external for an audience and customer base they're trying to build, or if it's internal for employees too.
I love it. I love it. So as we were talking offline, I'd love to just dive into the meat of what we were talking about offline. And you know, as we think about this idea of bringing in more creativity into B2B marketing, to give a little bit of context, could you share maybe a little bit of your kind of before you started speaking to marketers in mass? Carla, you were a B2B marketer yourself. So could you talk about kind of, you know, why this became a topic that you're now so passionate about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I still do work with B2B brands to help them, because what I've seen over the years of working in B2B marketing is that we tend to look at the work that we do as B2B marketing as boring to boring, rather than something like we sell something boring, but let's make it brilliant and fascinating and interesting. And marketers tend to discount great ideas because they say, well, you know, I'm not a Red Bull, I'm not an Apple, I'm not a Google. And so therefore, a lot of the things that they do aren't realistic for me to try in my world. So we see opportunities to have inspiration from great brands or from great experiences or great ideas that we hear just, you know, in our daily life, but we tend to discount them because we say, well, that just doesn't work in my world. It's not realistic.
Yep, that totally makes sense. And so that kind of leads us into this idea that you have. It's called brand detachment disorder. Can you unpack this idea for our listeners, Carla?
Yeah, so I realized this, James, when I was sitting in the audience of a conference, because I was listening to somebody from Zappos, a consumer brand, and they were talking about their customer experience platform and their whole philosophy behind it. And I noticed that psychologically I started to check out. And, you know, when we do that, we're marketers and we're on our phones. We're looking around for anything else to fill that time. And I looked into what it was after the event was over. I started to look into what it was that made me do that. And that's why I called it brand detachment disorder, because it's really the tendency that we have to dismiss ideas that really are relevant and really are applicable to the work that we do as B2B marketers. But we say they aren't relevant or applicable because what we do or sell is different. So I was listening to Zappos and I'm saying, okay, well, they sell shoes to a consumer audience. That doesn't relate to me because I work with industrial companies or I work with mining companies or something else that's very B2B specific. So I understood that I was detaching from these ideas instead of using them for inspiration for the work that I was doing.
So just basically the takeaway there being to stay engaged in settings like that where you're, you know, be it a podcast episode that you're scrolling through and you recognize the name as being, you know, from a, you know, the guest is from a B2C brand, not necessarily scrolling through that because, you know, what they're saying isn't going to be relevant to me, or at conferences, like engaging and staying tuned in to what everybody across the spectrum is doing, because ultimately you can draw creativity from that. Am I hearing that right?
Absolutely. Is to be able to start to do, like, transplant the ideas from their brand into our own brand. So to do a brand transplant, we look at for that consumer brand, who was the audience that they were trying to connect with. And that doesn't matter if it has anything to do with our audience. It's just like a connect the dots exercise. So who's their audience? What is it that makes that audience come to that brand? And it's never about what it is that brand sells. It's about the value that they're able to deliver. And because of that, what change are they able to affect? Are they able to build rapport? Are they able to create a truly unique experience? What is it that they're delivering that's absolutely unique to that brand? And then look at it then from the B2B marketing perspective. Is this something that we want to have happen when people engage with our brand? And if that is the case, then we connect the dots backwards and say, okay, then what is the true unique value that I'm able to offer? And again, it's never about the product or service that you sell. And then what would make people come because of that? And then who's that audience you're wanting to serve? So audience is much bigger than just your customer base. Audience is everybody who you want to know and recognize your brand and has influence on creating that customer base. So then bring that back to your brand. And then we're able to start seeing how these really inspiring creative brands do have wonderful ideas that we can bring into our own world as B2B marketers.
Carla, could you share some companies that you've seen execute on this brand transplant really well?
Yeah, I think one of the brands, B2B brands, that I think has done such a fun process of this is a company called Grasshopper. And they do virtual voice systems for B2B brands and particularly entrepreneurs. So I had spoken with Allison Canty, she's our customer engagement manager, about where she got the inspiration for some of the campaigns that they've done over the years. Because the nice thing is that they're very good at taking the Grasshopper story and turning it into campaigns that sustain engagement over a long period of time. So they used to be called Got Vmail. And Allison said that they spent so much time just explaining what the name meant. Got Vmail is short for Got Voicemail. That if they were doing radio spots or other things, they really lost an opportunity to tell a story. So when they started to look at rebranding, one of the owners of the company came in, and it was probably like the Monday after the Super Bowl. And it was the first year that Doritos did a contest where they asked anybody to submit a video to be considered to be shown during the Super Bowl. Okay. So it was, they used their Super Bowl time to showcase the talents of their fans. And so the winner that year won $1 million, got to come to the Super Bowl, see his ad be shown on the screen. And Allison's boss said, you know what? The great thing about Super Bowl ads is that they just have crazy, insane word of mouth marketing because people want to share and talk about what it is that they saw. So when Grasshopper did their rebranding from Got Vmail to Grasshopper, they said, okay, how do we look at focusing on massive word of mouth sharing about the rebranding instead of putting a lot of money behind it? So they picked out 5,000 influencers in the entrepreneurial market, and they sent them a little package of 3 chocolate-covered grasshoppers with a little note in them about entrepreneurs being the backbone of the country. And Allison said it just went crazy, and they had insane coverage because news anchors ate them on air. I think they had coverage by 8 national news anchors, radio people, personalities were talking about it. She even got a call from the White House because it was the Security Council who said, what is this that you're sending to the White House? And, chocolate covered grasshoppers, is that really the case? So just the kind of exponential outcome based on the creativity of bringing something from a Doritos commercial at the Super Bowl into how they looked at their own marketing that went beyond anything that they could have expected. And I think if you start out as a B2B marketer and say, okay, I'm going to put a ton of budget behind this so that we can get that, it's not as real and genuine and authentic as it is, compared to if you took the approach that Allison and how they did the rebranding at Grasshopper.
I love that. That story wasn't Grasshopper copying what Doritos did. It wasn't a copy at all. It was looking at what they did, looking at it in their context. And like you said earlier, looking at the end result that they got, which was they got a ton of word of mouth out of it, and going, okay, well, how do we reverse that? How do we reverse engineer that end result that we want? Not in the same way that Doritos did it, but in our own way, and coming up with something totally different that was obviously inspired by, a brand that is completely different than theirs. So
exactly.
I love that.
So for Allison, she was able to connect those dots through the process of the buzz that happens around a Super Bowl commercial and then the benefits that they delivered in supporting entrepreneurs. So that's how, it's things like that, looking at how you can connect the dots through the process.
Yeah. So around this idea of connecting those dots, Carla, you've developed this framework called Creative by Design, and it has to do with connecting those dots. Can you talk to us about what that framework is and how that works when you're working with a B2B marketing organization?
Sure. So the ideas behind Creative by Design is that one of the biggest hurdles that we have with creativity is fear. Because we say, if you ask people if they want to be creative, everybody says yes, but it's not that they don't want to be creative. They don't want to take the risk that it takes to be creative. And so to deal with that fear, that's why we need a process to make creativity feel safe and feel familiar. And then looking at how we can practice that maybe every single day so that creativity becomes a habit. And we put that process of creativity ahead of the products that we want to sell. So that's what Grasshopper did in that case. And the framework is really what I've seen massively creative brands do, that they can perform at that peak level of creativity over and over again. And it's connecting those dots between what's the brand that inspires me, what's their audience, what's the true unique value that they deliver, and the change that they want to affect. And is that the change that we as a B2B marketer in whatever space or, whatever industry we're in, is that what we want to do? And now how do we connect the dots back into our brand in a way that feels truly unique and genuine to what we do, and also excites them about doing something new and different. And because that's the drive behind innovation behind companies.
Is there anything else around this idea bringing more creativity into B2B marketing that you would like listeners to walk away with before we shut down the interview today?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I want marketers to understand is that when you look at the world's most creative brands, what B2B marketers can understand is that if we're just able to surface ideas that we can put structure and framework and actually our own individual personal confidence behind, that's how we're able to create new and different experiences for whoever our audience is. And then that's what really delivers exponential outcomes. So in Allison's case, if she had put a bigger budget behind a rebranding, she probably would have had smaller outcomes. But because she understood this process of creativity, she and her company had exponential outcomes that they never could have imagined. If they had put paid promotion behind to get on national TV, it wouldn't have been as genuine. And the radio personalities, and even trying to reach the White House. So it's those kind of things when we look at creativity as a designed process. That's how we can start to get those exponential business outcomes, not just marketing outcomes, but this is something that actually drives the business in a way that your competition could never, ever copy.
Carla, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing this framework with us. I think it's going to be so beneficial to the folks that listen to this show. If there's somebody listening, maybe they want to dig deeper with you on this, or they want to learn more about what you and your team are doing with Type A Communications, what's the best way for them to go about doing both of those things?
They can check out my website, typeacommunications.com, and I have a blog there that digs into a lot of this in greater detail. I have some white papers on there. They can email me directly. My email is Carla with a C at typeacommunications, plural.com. And then my Twitter handle is simply at Carla Johnson.
Again, Carla, thank you so much for your time today. This has been fantastic, so I really appreciate it.
It was great to be here. Thanks for sharing your time this morning.
To ensure that you never miss an episode of the B2B Growth Show, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device.
If you'd like to connect with B2B executives from all over the world, make sure to join our private Facebook community. There are some incredible conversations happening inside this group. To join, visit b2bgrowthshow.com/FB.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.